In the summer of 2010, Julian Platt and his wife Andy, the then owners of an artisan bakery and French bistro, decided that it was time to roast their own coffee beans. With the specialty coffee trend on the rise in South Africa, Julian had a brainwave. Air-roasted coffee would be the new trend, and he acquired an old-type air roaster. After roasting up to 2.5 tons of coffee a month for 10 years, with incredible results and no control over the roast process besides setting a target temperature, Julian found that this roaster was starting to fall short. He embarked on a journey and started to design and build his own roaster from a wish list that he compiled from his experience of coffee roasting. After a year of development with 2 different engineers, Julian began to see his wish list come to life in the form of the first prototype air motion roaster. Air motion roasters now have their new generation machines in production, with many groundbreaking improvements made to air roasting technology today. Welcome to the head office of Air Motion Roasters. Let's take a quick tour. As you can see, we use a state-of-the-art coffee machine and grinder to test our air-roasted coffee, which is roasted in our Air Motion roasters. We have a very comfortable workspace and lounge area. The cherry on top is our showroom for the new generation Air Motion roasters for demonstration purposes.
Hi, my name is Julian. I'm the creator of the Air Motion Roaster. Today I stand very proud next to our new model 3 kilogram and 6 kilogram roasters. I'd like to invite you to join me while I do a demonstration roast for you.
Before we start our roast, we need to make sure that our settings are activated. We have activated our water dousing time, we have recorded the settings, and we are now ready to start. Switch on the cyclone. Turn up our blower fans to about 12% to make sure that when we do pour our beans into the roast chamber, we will remove all the residual dust from the beans. Now pull the roast chamber forward and remove the lid. Pour your beans into the roast chamber and watch as that residual dust is quickly sucked away by the extraction from the cyclone. Place the lid back onto the roast chamber, push the roast chamber console back into place, and turn up the blowers just until the beans touch the lid. This continues to clean the remaining dust from the beans in the chamber. We are now ready to start our roast. Turn up the heater dial to 100%. And turn the roast dial from the off position to the roast position. On our touchscreen, you can see that we have now started the timer, meaning that our roast has started. Turn the blower fans down until the beans drop about a quarter way down the roast chamber so that we can remove the lid safely without the beans jumping out of the roast chamber. The blower dial will be adjusted throughout the roast to keep the beans elevated at the correct level in the roast chamber. An important thing to note is that we started our roast at ambient temperature. We are now 1 minute into our roast, and the air temperature coming up through our roast chamber has reached just over 187 degrees Celsius in just over 1 minute. You will notice that throughout the roast we will keep turning the blower fans down because as the beans release the chaff and moisture, they get lighter by up to 14%. That means that in the same airflow speed, the beans will continue to rise. Therefore, the airflow needs to be adjusted to keep the beans at the correct elevation in the roast chamber. We are now 2 minutes into our roast. The air temperature coming into the roast chamber is now 255 degrees Celsius. One can also see that the rate of rise of the beans has reached its peak, and now it declines throughout the rest of the roast, which is expected in this roast profile. Our elements have now reached 274 degrees Celsius. The beans are now at 83 degrees Celsius. The first part of the roast is called the drying phase or yellowing phase. This phase is when heat is applied to the beans so that they can expand. When the beans expand, they release their skin or chaff, which is then removed by the extraction so that moisture can then evaporate and be removed from the beans. The bean temperature has now reached 100 degrees Celsius. This is the period where the moisture is extracted from the beans. The moisture needs to be removed from the beans because we want to caramelize sugars, activate amino acids, chemicals, and carbohydrates in the beans, and that cannot happen until we have removed their moisture. At this point, you can see that the beans are changing color from green to yellow. The green color of the beans is the moisture. As the moisture is being extracted, the bean color will change from green to yellow. The temperature of the air coming into the roast chamber is now at 340 degrees Celsius. The bean temperature has now reached 131 degrees Celsius with a rate of rise of 8.5 degrees Celsius. Rate of rise means how many degrees Celsius the beans go up every 30 seconds. Our beans are going up at 8.2 degrees Celsius every 30 seconds. We are now at 5 minutes and 32 seconds into the roast, and the beans are now yellow. We have successfully removed the moisture from the beans. When lowering the blower fans, when the beans start raising in the roast chamber, one has to look at the touch screen to lower them and not the beans. If we want to reduce the blowers because the beans are climbing too high in the roast chamber, we look at the touch screen and lower by 2%. Our bean temperature has now reached 166.7 degrees Celsius, and we are entering the Maillard reaction phase. This is where the sugars within the beans start activating and start to caramelize. The bean color is now changing from yellow to a caramel color. It will change to a tan color, to light brown, brown, and dark brown. When the beans get very dark, the beans become bitter, so we need to find that sweet spot whilst caramelizing the sugars. Now we pull our heat back to 90% from 100%. This is to slow down the roast at this point so that we can stretch our Maillard reaction phase and in turn stretch the development phase so that we can get more development out of our beans. We are now coming up to the first crack, also known as the development stage. That is when the heat has reached the center of the beans. The beans expand rapidly, causing it to crack, making a popcorn-like sound. The first crack has now started, and we press the first crack button. That will now start recording the first crack information. First crack started at 194.9 degrees Celsius at 9 minutes and 33 seconds at a 2.3% development, a percentage of total roast time. Right now, the development time is at around 2 minutes. We are looking at the bean color, and we are satisfied with this color of the beans. We will now stop the roast by turning on the water dowsing dial. A fine spray of mist is sprayed over the beans, instantly stopping the roast. This fine mist of water enters into the roast chamber, but is then sucked out by the extraction. We then press the save button to save our reference. The water dowsing has now completed. Place the lid on the roast chamber. Now we turn up the blower fans to continue cooling the beans, making sure that they are going into a negative rate of rise. We can see that the beans are dropping in temperature rapidly. Now we switch on the cooling tray. We then redirect the airflow from the extraction hood to our cooling tray by turning the cyclone hood handle and the cooling tray handle. We are now ready to discharge our beans into the cooling tray. The beans will then cool and get to ambient temperature in about 4 to 5 minutes. We now place our bucket underneath our cooling tray. We then release the beans into the bucket. Whilst this is happening, we are now able to start our next roast. And it's as simple as that. Air roasting made simple with Air Motion roasters. What makes Air Motion roasters different to other air roasters? The aesthetics of the Air Motion roaster will comfortably sit in any shop front in the world today. The person roasting has now got more control over their roast with dials that control air temperature and the blower fan speed, controlling the heated air coming into the roast chamber. A touchscreen interface allows the roaster to monitor all the roast information in real time. Air Motion Roasters boasts an over-engineered cyclone and extraction system that instantly removes all impurities from the roast chamber during the roast. A round cooling tray with agitator arms that cool roasted coffee beans in less than 5 minutes.
What an amazing result from an amazing roaster.
Air Motion Roasters. It's all in the taste.